Hi, everybody. It's Joe Cioffi here on this Saturday where we set numerous record lows from Minnesota, from International Falls, with temperatures there 35 degrees below average. I think it was 13 below was the low there. Got to 18 in Chicago. Set record lows in New York City for both Friday and Saturday. The low for Friday was achieved before midnight, and then it set a record low for Saturday. So a lot of records went by the boards with this rather cold air mass that's moved down into the Northeast. So, again, it's almost as if somebody just kind of flipped a switch here from the pattern that we were in from late September to the end of October. Then we had the big storm up the East Coast. It was not a nor'easter technically, but we had that major storm up the East Coast, and then after that, we have been kind of transitioning over to what's going to wind up being a blocking pattern. So I thought I'd spend some time today going through that and looking at it and what it means and what it doesn't mean, because everybody's getting all excited. Just because you go into a blocking pattern does not necessarily mean it's going to translate into anything exciting if you want a big snowstorm. And I just want to kind of make sure everybody understands this, that especially for areas in southern areas of the Northeast down into the mid-Atlantic states, it will mean that we will have colder than average temperatures as a whole. It doesn't necessarily mean that we won't have some warm-ups in between, particularly if we're dealing with nothing more than cold fronts running through every couple of days, where it warms up ahead of it and then it turns much colder behind it. But again, we're only in the middle part of November. We're not even through Thanksgiving, and the basic fact is that even in some of the snowiest of winters, you don't really see too much snow during the month of November in southern areas of the Northeast on southward. Now, it might be a different story when we get up into the upstate New York and into central and northern New England, if this plays out according to what some models suggest. But still a long way off, and to kind of start getting all wrapped up in all of this, I said this yesterday and the last couple of days, is kind of sort of a wasted energy. There isn't too much happening weather-wise across the country from the standpoint of rain or snow today, and the weather into the first part of this week, except for the western part of the United States, where you're going to keep getting these waves of moisture coming in as weather systems crash into the northwest. So rain and snows will continue there on and off. But as far as any big storms moving across the United States at this point, at least for this coming week through the middle part of the week, doesn't look like any big deal anywhere. So let's run the video today. It's a little longer than it usually is, just to give you a heads up, and we will come back at the end and chat for a bit. I thought we'd spend a little bit of time today taking a look at the broad pattern across the northern hemisphere as we watch this block evolve, and I thought maybe this way you can get maybe a good visual here in terms of how blocks work. I'm using the hemispheric view here so that you can actually sort of look at the atmosphere as if you're looking down at the flow rather than looking at it. And I want you to watch what happens up in this region here. Of course, this is Greenland in the Atlantic, as a big ridge is going to build there. But if you can sort of get the flavor of what the upper air pattern is, and we're starting from a couple of days ago before the cold air arrived in the east. And if you just kind of look at how everything is in the flow, you get a general sense that things are where everything's sort of moving along from west to east. You got the jet stream across the United States, bit of a split flow because of the low that's off the coast of Washington. And then you've got this cold flow out of Canada that brought down the cold air. And out in the Atlantic, you have an upper low that's off the northwest coast of Europe. And that is causing, creating a flow of air coming in off the Atlantic Ocean into Western Europe. You have a high that's just north of the Azores, okay? And of course, then you've got what's ever left of the subtropical high to the south, which continues to weaken now as we can progress through the month of November. Now, what happens, at least in the short term, we get this trough to swing through in the east and it lifts out. Now, there is some energy behind it. It's weak. You can see that little indentation here. This is going to be a little awkward here looking at the dates because of the map I'm using. But right through the Great Lakes, there's a weak shortwave trough there. There's another weak one out in the Rockies. Here's your stronger upper low off the west coast, and you've got a ridge down that's starting to build up toward Alaska, and also you're beginning to see there is a ridge that's building out in the Atlantic ahead of the trough that's brought in the cold air that's lifting out. So we'll move it along, and that trough that lifted out runs over Greenland, does its thing over there. The flow across the United States at this point, and we are now into Tuesday of this coming week. You've got pretty much a kind of a zonal pattern here, west to east flow across the United States. It's not especially warm, but it's not especially cold either. Canada is feeding down cold air, but much of that is staying up further to the north. You've got this low off the west coast of Canada, the big ridge that continues to build up toward Alaska. And as we move through the rest of this week, now you start to see the beginnings of the blocking pattern developing here, and we are now in the time frame of Friday and going into Saturday. So what happens? Here's the flow, a ridge building up in the Atlantic. There's an upper high that's over the polar regions, and you've got this upper high that continues to build up over the Aleutians now and the Bering Sea. So basically what you have is the entire top of the when I say the top of the atmosphere, let's call it the top of the world. I'm sorry. The entire top of the world is now under high pressure, okay, aloft. And as a result, the jet stream is suppressed way to the south. And now you're getting these upper air storms much further to the south. The jet stream being further south means that cold air, which normally would be colder as you go further north, cold air is getting displaced further to the south. So if you just want to kind of use the shaded area in blue, that would be an indication in general of colder air being displaced further south and warmer air, because of the high pressure building over the polar regions, being displaced to the north. Now, over time, as we move into Thanksgiving week, we are going to see this block get really established here. It kind of ebbs and flows, because as weather systems try to crash it, the ridge gets flattened a little bit. But one of the interesting things that I've noticed, at least with the GFS in terms of the long range, is that even after it crashes, it looks like, late in the period, that upper high wants to come back. So it seems to me that it does have some staying power, even though a lot of the climate models that go out into the long range, not all of them, but a lot of them are showing this breaking down as we move into the month of December. Now, I'm not going to discount that possibility, but I would just point out that oftentimes when you get a pattern change like this, especially with some of those longer range models, it can take them a while to catch up to whatever is going on in reality. Some of the European longer range models continue to show a fair amount of staying power with this, although it kind of flips a little bit from run to run. But as I've always said, the rule for me is if the trend is your friend, that's what you kind of stick with. We're going to go to the European, and I'm going to get a little tighter now, because this way we can focus in on North America. The European model, which only goes out through day 10, which probably from a forecast standpoint, at the very least, is a lot more valuable. So we'll back up the European, and here's the trough in the east, and then you start to see that ridge builds up toward Greenland. And you notice when there's higher pressure here aloft that builds up toward the North Atlantic like this, and it's almost like a finger that pokes its nose back westward across Greenland into northern Canada. The result is you wind up with the upper air storm just kind of being forced further to the south. The jet stream here, look how far south it is. Remember how strong a ridge we had along the East Coast? If you recall, when we were dealing with the ridge in the east and the trough in the west, we had a flow that basically was like this, okay? And that brought warmer air in. So you had this upper high here, all right? I've overlaid that on the jet stream pattern that's being indicated by late in the period around day 10. Look at the huge difference in this, with this deep upper air low sitting over southeastern Canada, northeast over to northern New England. I mean, this really basically pulls down colder air from the North Atlantic, from the regions of Greenland, down through eastern Canada and down into the southeastern coast of the United States. If we look at the temperature anomalies through all of this, look at the end of the period. Now, you're not going to stay, by the way, cold every single day. I mean, we will have occasional pokes of temperatures going above normal for a day or so as weather fronts make their way through. But the general trend over the next 10 days will be for near to below average temperatures. And as we move into Thanksgiving week looks to be, at least to start, looks especially cold. And if the GFS is right, it would have some staying power through the end of Thanksgiving week and toward month end. So, very interesting in terms of the overall pattern. I want to also show you, because of the fact that there's all this chatter and talk with regards to storms, and obviously the curiosity is there with regards to how does this play out from a practical standpoint. We'll put the surface anomaly. I'll use the normal anomaly because that's easier to see, and we'll back it up to the very beginning. So here we are today with this big high in the east. Got this low that's over the Oklahoma Panhandle. Not too much of in terms of any kind of high, pressure highs and lows in the western part of the United States. That high in the east pulls out. Now there's a weak little disturbance here. You can see it, how the isobars are in an upside down V. So there's a bit of an inverted trough there. So there is some semblance of a weak low that moves through the northeast, parts of the northeast and northern mid-Atlantic on Monday. But again, this is the European now. Tuesday, the high builds back in from Labrador, and then you start to get the next weather system coming into the Great Lakes with a weather front moving through on Thursday. Yet another system into the northwest. Now this is going to become a rather important storm system next weekend. Now this might be the one everybody's been talking about. Honestly, from what I see, I mean, this is going to be more of a strong cold front coming through than anything else, and then behind it a shot of very cold air for the first few days of Thanksgiving week. That's the way the European shows this at the moment. Now we'll look at the GFS, because with the GFS at least we can see the precip and everything else. So it's a little more practical. And I will show you, by the way, as we did introduce a week or so ago with regards to the European and being able to see the in-between times, when it gets relevant in a forecast sense, I will do that. Now here's the GFS today. Not too much happening around the country. Going into Sunday, looks fairly quiet, except in the northwest, where there's another one of these weather systems moving in. You can see that the GFS has a weak reflection of what's moving across the Ohio Valley. Some of the other models have a bit more with this. Then through next week, just on the chilly side in the east because of that high to the north being pinched in. And then we have a weather front for Thursday. Little shot of chilly air behind it, but nothing like what we just saw, obviously. You can see some scattered action going on in the west. Another system comes into the Pacific Northwest. Now, here's that system that the European wraps up, and so does the GFS into a deep low. But it's basically a cold front, and it might be might produce some significant snows for northern New England, depending on how this translates. And then after that goes by, it's cold air into the northeast and mid-Atlantic states, extending down into the southeastern U.S. With the high, but no other big storms. Still getting action in the west. Now we're into almost the day before Thanksgiving with a cold front coming through and a shot of cold air for Thanksgiving Day. More rain and snow in the northwest, and another weather front toward the end of the period as we get toward November 27th. So You can have all the blocking in the world, and I have said this many times, and I want to repeat this again. You can have all the blocking in the world, but if you do not have the troughs in the right position, it's not going to do you much good if you are a snow lover, okay? Particularly in the southern areas of the Northeast and in the mid-Atlantic states. Even though you've got blocking, you don't have weather systems across the United States. You don't have anything that's particularly intense, and what you do have that's intense is dropping in a position that would not produce a major storm for the mid-Atlantic and for southern areas of the Northeast. At least that's the way it looks right now. I would suggest, by the way, to pay more attention to what we can't see at this point. And what we can't see at this point is what models are missing on the smaller scale. There may be some sort of system in this along the way that models haven't really picked up on yet, and may not pick up on them until we get inside the 7-day period. So just beware of that, and I think that's something we're going to have to watch for. Now here's your above and below normal temperatures. So there's our cold blast that we're having now and lasts into Sunday. Although temperatures moderate and the anomalies moderate, you see how warm it is in the Rockies, and it is colder along the West Coast with that storminess. Now, during next week, as we go in between weather systems, it does warm up for a day or so, Thursday, Friday, it seems, and then a shot of colder air, another brief warm up before another cold front, and then we start to get into that colder air as we go into Thanksgiving week. Now we're into Wednesday. Warms up ahead of the next cold front, then back below normal, ahead of the next cold front, and then back below normal. So you can see how this pattern is playing out here with regards to the next 10 days to 2 weeks. Weather systems are going to be moving along more of the northern tier, with the weather fronts extending to the south, and does it appear like we're going to see any big storms through this coming week. We'll have to see how it plays out for perhaps central and northern New England for next weekend. That there might be a bit of a risk there. Let's jump now to southeastern Canada so we can take care of our friends in the Canadian Maritimes, and welcome to you you're watching. With all this blocking, it makes for interesting times weather-wise in many locations, including yours. And as we move through this week, we're into Tuesday. Doesn't look like too much happening there until we get to late Thursday and Friday with a weather front going by. You have low pressure that develops southeast of Newfoundland. We'll have to see how, that's all in response to the blocking that's developing with some snows there. Here's the more important storm into New England for the weekend of the 18th, 19th, and you get some snow and rain with that. Looks like the peak intensity is when it reaches northeastern New England, and then the low starts to weaken. Moving through our Thanksgiving week, you do have some weather systems that are going to have impact into the Canadian Maritimes. It does not appear at this point to be anything major. And with regards to your snowfall, starts to get pretty generous in some places with some 2 and 3 foot amounts. Again, this is probably being generated by the fact that the GFS does show a strong storm up in central and northern New England. And extends up into southeastern Canada and over New Brunswick, getting some snows putting down in Newfoundland, in Nova Scotia, away from coastal areas, and of course it keeps going on and on over Labrador. Over to Europe now as we look at their 10-day snowfall forecast. And wow, looks like England gets into some snows here along the western side at least, and throughout much of Scotland, and a good chunk of Northern Ireland, the northern half of Ireland, getting into some snows, and also seeing some rather solid snowfall in eastern France, a good chunk of Germany and the Netherlands, on up through northern Italy, and then back over into Austria and Slovakia and the Czech Republic, through Poland. Not bad. So let's see what's actually playing here in terms of the surface. See what's going on. Let me be particularly curious here from this model run. I'm going to do this is just kind of a very sort of cursory look here of of what's happening. So we're into Sunday, Monday, and there's your snow producer here in the Alps and into eastern France and southern parts of Germany. There's a little system comes into England and Ireland along about Tuesday. Still have low pressure in the Mediterranean Sea spinning around. Now here's a more important low. Now we're at Friday, so this is the point where the blocking high starts to build up in Greenland. And there is a flow of cold air that's being funneled down here at this point. And there's a storm that the model brings into the English Channel along about day 9. So this is Tuesday, November 21st. So I guess from that, it's producing some snows out of it. I'm not quite understanding why, the model shows more rain than anything else. I mean, it does show a little bit of snow in southern England there by the 10th day. But, when I look at the snowfall map, it actually has a much more bullish view. So I'm going to have to try to figure this out, folks. I'm not quite understanding why the model might show one thing, versus rain and snow in terms of actual precip. And then when I put the snow map on, it shows something else. We'll look at the below and above normal temperatures. Maybe, that might at least give you a better sense. Looks like a good chunk of Europe at least starts out below average. Gets much below average there going into Monday, Tuesday, and then some little goes back a bit above normal, and then here comes some below normal temperatures as colder air sweeps in next weekend. So at the same time that the block is getting established, you're getting cold air also being put into much of Western Europe and the UK for a good chunk of our Thanksgiving week. It looks pretty cold throughout much of Europe. Very interesting how this all plays out. All right, stand by, folks. We'll switch it over for a bit of a chat, and just give me 1 second. I'm back. Christopher Alley, good to see you on here. And I hope to see you pop tomorrow in North Babylon, at the North Babylon Library. I'll be there. Actually, it's from 2:30 to 4. I had said 2 to 3:30. It's from 2:30 p.m. to 4 p.m. If you're watching from Long Island, it's on Deer Park Avenue. It's the North Babylon Library. So you can go to their website and get the latest information on that, or you can get it on my Facebook page. So let me address a couple of things. Daniello, about how long the Greenland block is going to be there. Well, right now, I mean, it certainly looks like the blocking pattern is going to hold into the end of the month. After that, hard to say. Blocking patterns are kind of unstable. They usually last for a week or two, sometimes a little bit longer, and then they tend to break down a little bit. But other times what happens is that, yeah, they'll break down, but then they come back. So this might be the first of several instances, maybe as we go through the next couple of months, of seeing a blocking pattern developing and breaking down. And as I showed you on the video, what blocking does is basically take the whole jet stream and just displaces it further south, which brings these colder air masses south. And let's maintain perspective. Again, it is November the 11th, Veterans Day. The average high this time of year is still way above winter levels. What we've seen today, just to give you an illustration, with New York City, for example, the lows were in the low to mid 20s. The highs right now, no one has gotten out of the 30s. It's basically middle to upper 30s. That's an average high low for the middle part of January. And even for the middle part of January, in some places, it's actually a degree or so below average. So we're pretty far out of whack in terms of the pendulum and how far it has swung now to the cold side with this shot of cold air that's moved down. We're going to go back closer to average. So you're not going to see middle of winter conditions here, even if this block develops. You will see something, you're seeing something like this ahead of it, but you're likely to see some cold shots along the way if the block takes hold in the way that I think it will. And there may be some opportunities for snow, but those opportunities will probably come the further north you are. So perhaps Great Lakes, interior areas of the Northeast and on up into central and northern New England, yes. Areas of the South, not so much. The only way that happens is if we get, some kind of weather system that comes out from the west and tracks to our south, and everything has to set up perfectly because of the time of year, the warm ocean, and all the rest of it. So, let's try and maintain, as I've been trying to say, perspective here in terms of where all this is going. As far as weather in Europe, I'm really starting to try to gain an understanding of it. I'm not sure why the GFS, when you look at the GFS map, and then I looked at the snowfall map, and it kind of didn't make sense to me. So I'm not sure how those algorithms play out on that model, with respect to the European maps. And also, we have the colder than average temperatures. I mean, that looks like it's pretty straightforward, and temperatures are going to, looks like much of Europe, much of this, particularly Western Europe, is going to be below average while we go into this blocking pattern. So that's a little different from what I remember. Usually when Western Europe is cold, very cold, it's warm in the east. But I guess, I don't have a lot of experience in paying attention to these things. It's only in recent years that we've really kind of had been able to even get this information on a constant basis. And now I'm starting to look at it because some of you are watching from that part of the world. White Thanksgiving in Maryland, Magnet Fishing Adventure TV. I wouldn't think that I don't see it from this, from what the GFS, what the models are showing. The blocking would certainly suggest that it would be colder, but whether there's something around to produce some snow is a whole nother matter. And I think, again, as I emphasize, those are issues that we will tackle in the short range. I know someone was asking about snow in Minnesota and in the north, and also, I might as well just take a look at the Great Lakes here. It looks like, there is actually some snow moving across northern Michigan overnight, and a little bit of snow in the northeastern corner of Minnesota, some scattered flurries in parts of the UP of Michigan. Not much else, though. And by the time we get to Wednesday, we get into some rain. Warmer air is going to try to move back into the upper Midwest as the action begins to shift a little bit further to the east and what's going on in the upper atmosphere. So this week, for the most part, is kind of quiet everywhere that I've looked. It's again, except for the West. And in fact, let me just pull up. Hang on just a second, folks. I'm going to just have to verbally do this. I forgot to do it for the U.S. In terms of looking at snow cover for the next 10 days. And yeah, I mean, even for the next 10 days, just to show you where we're going, it looks like much of the action, again, would be for central and northern New England and parts of northern New York State and up in the northern Rockies. A little bit of action around the Great Lakes, but nothing crazy because you don't have any kind of storm coming up from the southern part of the jet, and so where it could interact with the cold air that would be to its north. Too early for that sort of thing. But the snow cover continues to increase, which I think is bullish for the longer term in terms of a colder and snowier winter for the eastern part of the United States. I'm making a general statement here and not for any specific point or any specific city or any specific state, just a general statement. Remember, in some places, if your normal is 5 inches and you get 6, technically that's above normal. I mean, actually, it is above normal. Not technically, it is above normal. But it's not exactly, something to write home about if you're from an area that gets, 2 to 3 feet or 4 feet on a seasonal basis or more. Your normal's being higher, so you're used to it. Let's see. I'm just trying to make sure I got touched on everybody's question. Any questions that are here, because I don't like to miss out. Yep, looks like I got everybody. Late highs to Trish and Lou. Late highs to Daniela, who's here. 99 Wolves, haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you. And welcome, by the way, to Magnet Fishing Adventure TV. I got to check out, I assume that you're somewhere. I'm going to pull up your channel and take a look at it when I get a chance, because it's about, it's about fishing. So I'm going to take a look. And I just subscribed to your channel, so thank you. And of course, Southside Boxing, who's always here from across the pond. Good to see you here. All right, folks, I got a lot going on tonight, so I just want to let you know, because I got my 40th high school reunion. I'm a Cardinal Spellman High School graduate. Cardinal Spellman was in the Bronx, in the Bronx. And among its many claims to fame is that the Supreme Court Justice Sotomayor is a graduate of Cardinal Spellman High School, where she graduated 3 years ahead of me. So we were actually in the same building together at the same time, although I did not know her personally. And that has always been really cool. So I don't care what your politics are. She gets a pass from me because she went to my high school. Okay. And also, you might have seen, I did put it in the conversation because my daughter did give me permission to say so. I'm going to be a grandfather in next May. My middle daughter and my son-in-law expecting their first child, and I'm very excited about that. And thanks to all of you for being here today, by the way. I really appreciate it. A lot been going on in my particular life lately, and it's been a little bit hectic, and not all of it has been happy, but this is one very happy thing that has occurred, and I'm really treasuring it. So anyway, I got to call it a day, folks. Like I said, I got a lot to do. Got to get dressed and look young for my 40th high school reunion. So everybody have a great rest of your day. Check out website posts, although I'm not going to be doing anything this evening, on meteorologistjoecioffi.com, Angry Ben on nycweathernow.com, and latest Long Island weather on weatherlongisland.com. And congratulations to you, Southside Boxing, as your son just found out that you just posted. Good for you. I hope all the best. All the best. Is this your first grandchild on the way? Even more exciting if it's your first. And if it's your second or third, that is a wonderful blessing. I will be there hopefully at one day down the road with multiple grandkids. I always say the great thing about having grandchildren is that you enjoy all the good, fun stuff with them. And then when they get out of hand, you can just hand them back. You take care of them, because I already did that. They're yours. All right, folks. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.